Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Justin Klumbala. If you haven't already, please go ahead and click on the subscribe button below if you'd like to get more future videos from me. And then there's a bell button right next to the subscribe button to give you notifications when I come out with new content. To talk about posture today, we're going to get into the real kind of detail of how to get into a consistent, proper posture every single time that you address the ball. So this is something that is very important to talk about, and actually a great quote was from Jack Nicklaus. And Jack Nicklaus used to say, a great shot is 50% visualization, 40% setup, and 10% swing. So 90% of a great shot happens before you even hit the ball. 50% of it is visualization, but 40% is the setup. And the setup part is what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to get into really some great detail on how to get into each part of your setup. But if you kind of watch through this and really study this and really practice what we talk about in this video, I really think this is going to improve your consistency for every shot, because a lot of times any shot that you miss, it's sometimes just involved with your setup. So if you can learn to set up the correct way and consistently each time, you're going to see some great results from that. So let's get into it. The first thing is weight distribution. So as you can see here, I got my feet kind of at that on my legs on the diagonals here, just to kind of show you close up. That club goes straight up into the air from my foot. Inside of my foot hits the outside of my hip. Checking over here as well. Club's on the inside of my foot, outside of my hip. Gives me a good width of stance. I'm kind of feeling 50-50, so I kind of push back and forth from foot to foot, just feeling that nice 50-50 position there. And then from this point of view here, from heel to toe, what I like to do is I like to keep the weight evenly distributed between my laces to my heels. Nothing out on my toes. So you'll see good players typically when they jostle their feet, they're going to pick up their toes. They won't ever pick up their heels. You'll never see a good player pick up their heels. They'll always kind of pick up their toes as they go back and forth. Okay, so what I'm doing here is I'm kind of going back and forth 50-50 with my feet, and then also picking up my toes to make sure that my weight is distributed there. Now let's move on to posture. Posture is going to be very important. What I like to talk about to get into a good posture is what we call 3 bends and a tilt. Okay, so the first bend, we're going to start, now that we got our weight distribution correct and our width of stance correct, we're going to start in a military stance. And this first move that we're going to do here going into our posture is to feel that our back pockets go back behind our heels as I bring my chest coming forward. So that's 2 moves there. My back pockets of my pants here are going back behind my heels. And if I drew a straight line down from my heel, my back pocket there, it hits about 4 to 8 inches behind my heels there. So I'm pushing this back from my hips, pushing that back while my chest comes forward, trying to keep my back as straight as possible. That's really important. As I come forward, I'm bending my chest forward as my back pockets go backwards, but keeping my back as straight as possible. A good little drill that you could do here is by putting the club on your back spine and keeping that straight from my tailbone all the way up to the back of my head here. And as I push back on my hips here and my chest comes forward, I'm still keeping the tailbone to my back of my head nice and straight. So that's the first bend, is to go from bending of the hips. So I bend the hips coming forward, and from this position here, I have my legs locked. So I'm going from a locked position, bending my hips here. That's the first bend. Bend number 2 is going to be the bend of my knees. So all I'm doing is just cracking my knees. So my knees are kind of locked at this position here, and now I'm just uncracking them, and that's about as much knee bend as I need. We want to avoid too much knee bend, because as you can see, that tends to get my tailbone to tuck under and then gets my chest to be straight up and down. So I want to feel like my tailbone is not kind of pulled up into the air, and I'm keeping just a very light amount of knee bend here. Now the third bend, if you notice when we bent from the hips here, this first little bend here, I kept the tailbone to my knee, tailbone to the back of my head pretty straight. But my last little bend here after I bend my knees is to tip my cap down so that I'm now looking straight onto the golf ball. So you'll see there's a little bit of a space between the back of my head to the shaft here. So I'm just bending that down so I can look straight onto the golf ball. Okay, so those are the 3 bends there. Let's just go over that one more time. Bending from the hips, cracking the knees, tip the cap down, and those are the 3 bends. Now the tilt is going to be the right shoulder being slightly lower than the left. If you notice here on when I grip a club, my right hand is lower on the club than my left hand. So when I go to set up to the ball, I want to make sure that my right shoulder is slightly tilted lower than my left shoulder when I'm setting up to the golf ball there. So I kind of have my 3 bends in my tilt. So I get my 3 bends, and then I tilt my right shoulder a little lower than my left. And now I'm into a great little setup there to get set up to the golf ball, okay? 3 bends and a tilt. Now the last thing I want to talk about here is just where your shoulders are pointing. So depending on where your swing path tends to be, if you are more of a person that tends to swing more over the top and tends to hit either pulls or slices, you're going to want to set up with your shoulders a little bit more tilted to the right. What that's going to allow you to do is to get your swing path to be more inside out. So as you can see here, if I put my club on my shoulders here, if I'm one that tends to swing outside in a lot, I'm going to want to pre-tilt my shoulders a little bit more to the right, because that's going to help my swing path kind of swing more inside out. Now, if you're one that tends to hit more hooks and pushes, so if you're one that hooks the golf ball to the left or right, this is all for a right-handed golfer, or pushing the ball to the right a lot, so hooking it to the left or pushing it to the right, that might be because your shoulders are too close. So you might want to actually get your shoulders to be slightly more open at the address position, which is all kind of controlled by your ball position. So the more that the ball is forward in my stance, the more my shoulders tend to aim more left. The more the ball position's more in the back of my stance, the more I tend to aim my shoulders more to the right. Now, I'm not saying that if you're trying to hit the ball more from the inside out that you should play the ball all the way back in your stance. No, I'm just saying that if you tend to want to swing a little bit more inside out, you're going to want to play that ball position just a little bit further back in your stance. Not all the way back, but just slightly further back in the stance. Okay? And then if you're trying to hit more of a fade and come a little bit more outside in, you're going to play that ball position a little bit more forward in your stance, which then gets those shoulders pointing a little bit more left. So I know I covered quite a bit of information in there, and I would love you to kind of watch this through maybe one time, maybe even watch it through again, but practice this at home or even practice this at the range, but really try to work on getting into these positions that I demonstrated here, because the more that you can get into a more proper setup and a more consistent setup, you're going to help your chances of having more consistent outcomes because you're setting up more consistently going forward. Thanks so much for watching this video. If you haven't already, please click on the subscribe button below and the bell sign next to it if you want to get notifications for future videos that I do. And then also, if you like this video, please click the like button. That really helps out my my channel and really helps out the YouTube algorithm. So if you do like this video, please go ahead and click that like button. Thanks so much again for watching. I really hope this helps your game.